decided that the best way would be to go to the Conservation Commission and discuss with them, since they are a recommended body to this board on the special exception criteria, to find out what their feelings are on this proposal. At their first meeting, they understood what we were proposing, and then went out and looked at the land and so forth. And at their second meeting, they granted the request to recommend favorably to this board for us to have a special exception for the wetland exception. However, they felt that it would be better if the house was located 25 feet back from the road instead of the 40 feet, which would give a little bit more land in the rear of the house. The 40-foot, as we proposed it, did not require a variance. But with their recommendation, it required a variance. Do you want me to take both as one, even though you're going to have to vote on the variance request first?
Well, we'll certainly be voting on both of them separately, but I'd say take whichever one you want.
Thank you. So what we did with the Conservation Commission is agreed to consolidate both of the lots to build a single-family, single-family residence on that particular thing. This is not contrary to the special interest. I know that all of you go out and look at the properties. You've seen the properties. You've seen that there are a few of them that are that are close to the road as well. We don't feel that 25 feet is going to impose any real hardship in the character of the land as it exists in that particular area, and that in the overall development of the property, the recommendation of the Conservation Commission seems reasonable. It also gives the people that have owned these lots for a very long time a chance to have the lots developed for what they were intended to do, single-family homes. And so it gives them a chance to use their property in a reasonable manner, and not out of character or contrary to the zoning ordinance for single-family homes in that particular area. The construction of a new home in that area, I think, would add value. It's not going to depreciate any or diminish the value of any of the homes in that area. It'll be the largest lot in that area, the two lots, and it will be, as I indicated, a reasonable use based upon the situation as to the use of those two lots under the National Zoning Board at this period of time. And substantial justice will be done to the landowners. They will be able to use their land for what it was intended to be, a single-family house. Now, as a special condition, conditions, I believe that you have in your package a copy of the letter from the Conservation Commission, which states that they favorably recommend it but only being 25 feet back from the road. The requested use is listed in a matrix of uses as a special exception with the recommendation of the Conservation Commission. The requested use of the property as a single-family home will not cause undue traffic congestion in the area. It's a single-family home, which is what exists presently in that particular area. It will not overload any public water source or public uses in the area. It is not out of character because the character is single-family residence. There are 9 special conditions. We have provided the board in our package a copy of those nine special conditions. If you want, Mr. Chairman, I'll read them, or just...
Well, in the written application, it addresses the 9 criteria. So I think it's addressed in the written application.
Yes.
I'm wondering if there's folks with questions in the audience that might come up. You know, maybe we did address them specifically. I think for now, we have them on the written record.
Okay. Thank you. And As I indicated, you have the letter from the Conservation Commission dated January 3rd, 2018. I am willing to answer any questions that you may have, and our engineer here as well to answer any more technical questions.
All right, we'll see any questions. Mr. Lionel?
One of the requirements or the stipulations from the Conservation Commission was that the backyard is to be left in its natural state, no backyard, with the exception of the installation of drainage systems and natural plantings. I'm a little, and it says about, as shown on the latest plan set. Is the latest plan set the thing that we have in our packet? Because it looks to me, at least based on this diagram here, that there is a substantial backyard. Not clear what is meant to be planted there.
We do have a meaningful backyard, and that helps out with the request for the 25-foot setback from the road. Since I didn't draft the plan, I'd like to ask our engineer who drafted it to make the comments to you instead of myself, if that's,
Sure.
that's fine.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Chris Gaida. I'm a certified wetland scientist and soil scientist with Fieldstone Land Consultants, and our business is located at 206 Elm Street in Milford, New Hampshire. To your question, sir, the backyard, anything behind the house obviously is a backyard, but that area is utilized as an infiltration. There's 2 basins in there. I'm not sure if on the size of the plan that you have, if you can see them well, but I'm happy to point them out here on a larger scale plan. Right in this area here, there's 2 infiltration basins. So the whole intent of this is to basically keep any stormwater from running off of the site. So it's been graded so that that stormwater infiltrates into the soil and doesn't run off into the wetland area. So the backyard is essentially a swaled area that directs the flow to these 2 leaching catch basins on the southern side of the area.
Yeah, I see the catch basins in the diagram. What material is this backyard? Is it just grass over?
Right, it's the native soil is a sandy soil. It's like a gravel and outwash. So it's essentially, I would imagine it would be grass, some type of stabilization, whether it's a conservation mix is typically what they use, which is a mix of grasses, native grasses in that area. There would be some maintenance, obviously, because you don't want to, you want to be able to maintain that flow through this area and the grading. So you wouldn't want, you know, large trees growing into that area that would change the flow of the water in that area that's designated as infiltration.
Thank you.
So it would be vegetated, I guess is a short answer.
Are you all set?
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? I guess I have a question for the engineer. If you could clarify, like, what, so that, I think, let me just paraphrase what I think you were saying. So the backyard, as we know it, is going to be a swaled detention basin. So is that when the Conservation Commission says no backyard, is it saying that that's not going to be something where there's sheds and swing sets? It's just going to be like
That's
a pond?
correct, sir, yes.
Yeah.
As far as structures, any type of structures is not permitted back here. What they were concerned about, I believe, is that the whole purpose of moving the house forward was to try to keep impact away from the brook. So in doing so, we talked about having a side yard as basically an area where folks could put up picnic tables and lawn furniture. This area in here did have a former structure. You can kind of see some of the tree line that's outlined here. It's long since gone, but that area was graded and had some gravel, a bed essentially in there for some type of old structure it's now long ruins. But the plan is for that side yard is for folks to use and not to utilize the backyard as sheds, as you mentioned.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for the engineer? We're all set on it. Actually, I have a question for Mr. Pruner. You had mentioned about long-standing lots of record. How long have these owners owned these 2 lots? And the other question I have is, it seemed like there might have been some other discussion about developing houses as a single lot. There was a reference to that in the package we have. What is the history of that? I'm curious.
A long time ago, these lots were approved, I think probably in the 1970s originally. As the time period came over, the owners at various times wanted to do something with their lots, to build houses. But they came forward as only one lot, not the two lots. It was decided to put the two lots together to make a better lot as far as the wetland was concerned, and the Conservation Commission agreed that that made sense.
All right, thank you. One last call. Any other questions for the applicant? All right, thanks for your presentation. Was there anybody else here to speak in favor of this proposed two-lot consolidation and house on Curtis Drive? Anybody else in favor? Is there anybody else with questions, concerns, or opposition? I would say, thank you, ma'am, I recognize. Let me just jump in and say we have a letter that Mr. Chris O'Neill wrote. Is he here tonight? Is he going to present tonight? Okay, well, I'll read. We all have the letter, and we've read it. I don't think I'm going to read it into the record tonight. It's kind of a long letter, but we've all had a chance to read it and digest it. So I would like to note that we have Mr. Chris O'Neill's letter on record. And then, ma'am, did you want to speak? If you could come to the microphone and give us your name and address, we'd like to know what your thoughts are. You might just want to pull that microphone a little bit closer so it'll pick you up. You can just bend that around or just hold on to it if you want. There you go, that's great. I'm sure that'll pick it up.
Thank you. My name is Andrea Pierce. I'm the owner and resident at 14 Curtis Drive. And I'm here in opposition this evening to speak to the board in regards to the impact that the water table already has on it and will continue to have on it if this home is built there, and the wetland impact that has also been contributed to negatively over the last 14 years. There used to be 40 acres plus of land behind my home. It's now all been developed. All the vegetation, the trees, the animals, everything that was ever there is now gone, and it has disrupted the water table. There's flooding on our street. There's flooding in the neighborhood on a regular basis, especially in the winter and the spring. Flooding specifically in front of my house in the cul-de-sac area. The water main veins that flow from Salmon Brook and through the wetlands empty into this brook. And in the winter times, if you drive down the street, you can see where the frost heaves are, where the water does flow underneath the ground. They obviously raise up in the winter and come down in the spring. Those lines of water flow into that river, and those heaves are exactly where they're going to be putting that house. So although you see here a drawing, if you look at pictures that I have, that I had droned from above on the land, you can see that the parcel of land really isn't that big and that far away from.
Would you mind if Ms. Vitale grabbed those so she could show us?
That big, and it's going to be directly on top of the water lines that come from under the ground under the street into where their house is going to be. Where's all that water going to go? We were already having severe water issues. This is flooding in the spring. This is flooding in the winter. I have a picture on my phone from this morning. 3 times as bad right now with all the warm weather that we've had. We also don't have, and if you look at the river from above, this is in the winter time. It gets twice as big when that water is no longer frozen. It expands. So they have this drawing here showing X amount of bufferage.
But if you, ma'am, if you just want to grab that mic and.
X amount of bufferage and zoning area and space, but they're not taking into account the actual natural effects of what happens to wetlands in the springtime and in the summer and in the winter when we get a lot of snow. This will expand 2 or 3 times its size. So they do the surveying, they're there for a week, maybe 2 weeks, they survey, they take all their measurements, but if they were to go there once a week throughout the flooding season, they'd realize that that expands. And then that causes water and drainage issues. The other aspect that's of concern is that we don't have water on our street. We don't have a fire hydrant. We have a fire road that goes from one street to the other, so that if there's a fire at my house or any of my neighbors on our street, they have to plug into the fire hydrant on the other street, come down this road, which is not really maintained very well with the city, and I have to fight with them to get it to be accessible for a fire truck, and plug in and then put out a fire. We don't have water to hold the houses we have now. We really shouldn't have any more houses put on our street for safety. And it's just, lots happened in 24 years of my family owning this home, and we've watched a whole lot of wildlife go away, the water table be disrupted. I know family and friends that own properties in Cadigan Way, which are the condos on the other side of the river, that once all the construction started, their basements all were flooded. They had to have all their basements sealed, they had to have all their flooring redone, because when we took out all those 40 acres of trees, there was no more vegetation sucking up the water. So the table has been disrupted over the last 14 years of all this construction, and they're still doing construction. I still hear blasting. My house still shakes on a regular basis. It's been going on for 14 years. It's just, we have enough housing in that area, and those lots used to be, I can answer your question about the time about the lots. They used to be land lots. They were sold as land lots.
If I
The
could,
people
uh,
that
just-
bought them hope to someday build, but
Okay. Thanks, hold on a second. Is it Andrea?
Andrea Pierce.
Andrea
Yes.
Pierce. Okay, are there any questions for Ms. Pierce? I have a couple questions for you. So at the beginning of your testimony, you were saying that the water runs across the street, or is it running under the street, or both, you think, because of the frost heaves? Because I'd like to question the engineer when he comes back. What was your testimony on that again?
Here is a picture taken last week of the frost heave, one of the major ones. There's 2 of them that perforate every year regularly in the same spot. One's here, and then one's like a little further from where I'm standing. And what happens is the road, we know how frost heaves work. The ice freezes and the road goes up and cracks, and then in the springtime when the water's less solid, it flows through. And if you look at the aerial photo, I believe you have it. There that actually, there's one up there that you can, if you look down, you can see where the water comes through the ice from that crack in the road. So you can see where it flows underneath and comes underneath the street where the frost heave is and comes into right where they're going to build that house.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a major waterway. And I know that on some of my very, very, very old city plot plans here, those are marked. They're marked as known waterways underneath the ground that fluctuate with the water table.
Okay. Another question I had is, is your street, are you on wells, or you have?
I am on a well and septic.
Okay, do you know if every other house is on a well and septic?
Yes, we are, and that was also brought up at the conservation. When we asked them where were they going to put the well, they said, what well? I said, the well for water for the house. They said, oh, we're tapping into city water. I said, no, you're not. We don't have city water.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you going to put the well? The gentleman said, oh, well, we'll put it over here in the side yard. So you're just going to drop a well in the side of the yard on a riverbank?
All right,
I don't know how
well,
much that's going to do. Whose vein are they going to tap into? How can they guarantee that the other wells won't dry up? Which we've had 2 on the street, had to be re-drilled because they did dry up, so.
I don't have the answer, but we'll have the engineer back here in a little bit, see what we hear. I guess the other question I have is, did you say that as Maplewood got developed, you've seen more runoff coming down your way?
Oh, a tremendous amount. Major flooding. I mean, the plow guy in the wintertime, the plow guy or the postman takes out my mailbox every year because it just floods the whole cul-de-sac. It just gets, and it's gotten worse. Like I said, I have pictures from like 2004 and 2005 when my family owned the house, and the flooding, and then again, the pictures you see there for spring and winter, and I mean, you can come down my street now, and you can see all the major flooding it literally destroys my front yard and the driveway. I can't even get a paved driveway because of the flooding, and no one will guarantee the work that they do. So,
All right, thank you. Were there any other questions for Ms. Pierce? Oh, Ms. Vitale has a question for you.
yes.
You started to say something about your memory from your family on the lots along that side of the street. Can you just expand on that a
Sure,
little
they were
bit?
originally sold as land lots, not house lots. And then that's what you guys brought up this evening, that changed in variance to try to they're trying to change that so that they can build on them. But they were sold to them as land lots a very long time ago. And I guess, they bought them as land lots hoping someday they would be able to get a variance and get a change, but that didn't happen. So that's why they're, trying to do that now, but it's just, there's not enough land there, and the water table is so negatively impacted already. I'm so
right.
fearful of more flooding.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Any other questions? All right, thanks for coming tonight. You could have a seat. We'll see what else we hear. Was there anybody else with questions, concerns, or opposition? Hi, sir, if you'd like to come and give us your name and address. Just wondering, after this fellow speaks, are there others who are going to be speaking on this case about Curtis Drive? Okay, so we just have Ms. Pierce and yourself. Hi, good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Representative Marty Jack from 83 Cadigan Way, which is fairly near this parcel. I represent District 36, which this parcel is inside of. This case is very reminiscent of Kathy Drive, which you had a couple of years ago, where they wanted to build a house very, very close to Salmon Brook that was approved. What I'm concerned about is a little bit of mission creep on the buffer footage. The ordinance sets it at 75 feet. I assume there's some science behind setting it there. And when you start approving variances to take 22 feet off of that, suddenly maybe that's the new norm, and then you get closer and closer and closer over time. So I would encourage the board to be very cautious. Those zones are there, and when you have to add 9 conditions to an approval to make it work at all, maybe it's not a good idea.
Thank you. Hold on a second. Were there any questions for Mr. Jack? No questions. I just wanted to clarify something. We'll get that clarified. The request is to work within the 75-foot prime wetland buffer. I guess as I look at this, I don't know whether that's permanent or temporary impacts, but we'll get that. We'll find that out in a moment. All right. Well, thank you for that. I'll just ask one more time, was there anybody else to speak in opposition or with questions or concerns? Seeing none, if the applicant would like to come back. You've been following along.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just give us your name and address again, because the transcriber may not,
Yes,
link the voice.
Chris Gaida with Fieldstone Land Consultants at 206 Elm Street, Milford, New Hampshire. There's quite a few lists there, but I'll just try to take every one by themselves. The frost heave issue, obviously this time of year, everybody's familiar with frost heaves. It happens everywhere, almost under every road except maybe the state highways. There is water in the soil. It freezes. It freezes more under roads because when you plow it, the frost goes deeper. As that thaws and freezes again, you do get the frost heaves. There's water in the soil everywhere. This road has been, when it was built, there are
You're going to
drainage.
stay kind of close to the mic, or just grab it and take it with you. It might be
Yeah,
easier.
I'm sorry, I have a habit of doing that. So there are drainage structures along this roadway, catch basins that do discharge out into Salmon Brook. Those are obviously all existing. We don't propose any changes to that. As far as the former engineering and design and drainage along Curtis Drive, again, we're not proposing any changes to that. That exists, all the homes there exist. As far as there being waterways going under here, I haven't seen the maps that she's talking about. I'm not familiar with that. There's no structures like culverts or anything like that. We didn't notice, as a wetland scientist, when I flagged this, there's no indication whatsoever of any water travel on the surface. Under the surface, obviously, you can't really see unless you're digging through there. No evidence whatsoever of drainage swales that would channel water through this area. I'm not seeing that as an issue on this property. She mentioned that the lots, are really small and there's not enough land here. We concur that as far as the buildable area, it is restrictive, and which is why we're proposing to join 2 lots of record together for 1 home. I think that goes a long way towards trying to make the case that we are sensitive to the issues in this area, but we are also sensitive to the property rights of these folks that want to develop their property. As far as the other properties in the area that she mentioned, as far as clear cutting and changing the water table, again, there's really nothing we can do about that. Individual property owners have a right to develop their property within the regulations, of course, and things do change over time. We're in a period of climate change. There's not a whole lot that we can individually do about that or on a scale that we're working with here tonight. As far as the wetlands go, as a wetland scientist, we go through a lot of training. I have a lot of experience as far as delineating the wetlands. There's lots of different types. There's several lines on here. You'll see the wet jurisdictional wetland line is this heavy black line here, which is the edge of jurisdictional wetland. There's also a line here, which is the shoreland reference line, which is the normal high water line of Salmon Brook, which is designated as far as the State Shoreline Protection Act. We're not contesting that in the springtime, rivers flood, snow melts, and that we have rains. This is a floodplain area. The water does come up in the spring. It comes up to right about this jurisdictional wetland line. We're not hiding anything. We're not trying to pretend anything that it's not. It goes back down. So there's different categories here. We've represented them all to the best of my ability on this plan. I don't see that as being any type of issue that would restrict the development as we're proposing. Again, part of this whole plan is to ask this board for a variance that was asked for by the Conservation Commission, who approved this plan. We walked this site thoroughly with them, went over all these instances. They would like the house moved more forward. We're happy to come before this board and ask for their request. I'm not sure if there was any other, as far as the well location, we are proposing a well here. It does meet all the requirements, the setbacks to the state. There is one house, one Curtis Drive, that is served by municipal water, and the rest of them aren't. This is also serviced by sewer. She mentioned site well and septic. There's a sewer line down here, so there is no sewer on-site septic. It's going to be directed to the municipal sewer. I see I'm out of time, but I think
Okay, Mr. Boucher has a question for you.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, just for everybody's knowledge, what's being proposed on this lot, and because I've heard this before in other cases, but I just want you to speak to it so that everybody understands that putting this home here, what you're doing is you're not adding to any of the problems, correct, that are existing in the neighborhood.
that's
Right.
correct.
So you could just speak to that for a minute and what you're doing within the lot, the buildable
Yes, sir.
lot.
Yes, sir. Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, this whole site has been designed so that any runoff from the site, from the home, the roof, the driveway, gets captured in the property itself and is directed to these catch basins to infiltrate into the ground so that it does not run off the site or into the wetlands. It gets treated by, infiltration into the grounds. There's going to be silt fence here during the construction. There's going to be vegetation planted, native vegetation along this buffer area. Any invasive species that are along here that we noticed a few with the walk with the Conservation Commission are going to be removed and disposed of properly. It's going to be vegetated and stabilized. We're not proposing any use in the backyard. The third sheet of this plan has a whole set of erosion control details. As I mentioned, silt fence, infiltration basins, standard procedures for erosion and sediment control.
And just to clarify, for myself and for everybody else, in general, you were hired by the applicant, but what responsibilities do you have, because you have a stamp on this drawing, right? So do you have a higher responsibility than just serving your client as far as, I don't want to call it ethics, but when you're doing something like this, right, you're not, I would say that you're not necessarily going to appease the client, right? You're not going to put anything here that you can't back up, right? Because you're risking,
That's right.
right? So-
Yes, as a professional and as a certified wetland scientist and soil scientist, I've gone through way too much work to put that on the line for no reason. We have a responsibility, and it is ethics. It's to the land, essentially. You know, I do the best job that I can to represent things as accurately as I can to the best of my ability. It's similar to surveyors. A lot of folks, if they have their land surveyed, a surveyor comes, lays out a land, and all of a sudden, you know, oh, you stole an acre of my property, you know, or you gave it to my neighbor. Those lines are those lines. It is what it is, you know, per the deed. We don't make anything up. It's on the plan, you know, good or bad. We go through the process. We're going through the wetlands process, the zoning board, the Conservation Commission. We do have another permit to obtain through the state Shoreline Protection Act. We're going to go request that as well if this board sees favorably on this project.
Okay, thank you.
I think Ms. Vitale has a question for you.
Besides, what I see is you have some fill tracks that I see your little diagrams that you have out here, some compost socks, and, you know, what are you bringing in? Any type of fill? What else do you have to bring in to be able to do this property?
Sure. Yep. So there's actually very little amount of fill material here. The site pretty much balances. It falls off a little bit to the rear. You'll see these dark lines that basically regrade or channelize that flow here into these catch basins. As far as anything in the back here, as far as this swale goes, we did have long discussions with the Conservation Commission as far as making sure that's revegetated with native vegetation. Any of this the silt socks and silt fence, that'll be installed before any work gets done. Once the land is stabilized and these trees and the grass have a chance to develop, those will be removed. The silt socks typically will leave them in place because they're filled with compost and they basically just degrade into the natural soil and act as a berm in that area. So everything that's not shown in this red line, there is a fair amount of vegetation along this brook that's going to remain. We don't propose disturbing any of the trees, anything along the bank of the brook here. The area we're proposing disturbance is essentially already been disturbed by previous development. It's long gone now, but the trees have been removed and it's mostly prickers and poison ivy and that kind of stuff.
The basins that you're talking about, are they, because it's not like a bigger area here that I'm looking at, are they in the 100-year flood area? Or are they out?
Oh,
are
those are outside of the flood area. Yeah,
So-
so the flood line is on here as well.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out which line that was.
Right, and it kind of, I apologize, it gets a little busy, but it runs right along basically the edge of the red line where those basins are. It's about, that's about 8 feet or so off of those basins, and that line is essentially an elevation, you know, when the river floods up, so This is a fairly steep bank as that's going up, so although it's only about 8 feet away, it's also about 2.5 feet away vertically.
Has the 100-year flood area changed in the last 20 years?
I think it probably changes every year. You know, FEMA updates their maps periodically. We've all seen a little bit of increase in some of the flooding folks have noticed. Whether it's climate change, nobody really knows for sure. But as far as a significant change, no. I mean, this is the up-to-date accurate map, the most accurate one that we have.
And where the house is to be located, is it all within the 75-foot buffer?
Yes, I believe it is. Yes.
How many places along Salmon Brook that you know of that current housing, since that we put that buffer in place, have been built entirely within the buffer?
I'm not familiar with, I didn't do any extensive research on that, but I know that as existing lots here, there really is there's no area at all. There's a very, very small area that's outside the 75-foot buffer on these two lots put together. Again, which is why we're proposing to merge these lots.
And what is being proposed as far as vegetation in the back? You mentioned grasses. Are those grasses that were picked out by the Conservation Commission? And how is it ensured that those particular grasses are going to be the ones that are continued to be planted versus other types of grasses that, don't necessarily hold the soils in the same way?
Sure. Well, as far as, the ownership goes, I mean, we're required to obviously follow the plan as well as the owner. So we're going to make sure, and I'm sure the conservation's going to make sure, as far as site walks, periodic inspections, that those are planted and maintained. I don't know if there's plan is always going to exist as far as legally what the deed would mention, if it mentions anything about this. I know the Conservation Commission asked to have buffer placards placed, so we'll do that. They'll be well aware, I'm sure, that is an issue as far as this plan goes, and maintaining that vegetation. As far as control over if someone else buys the property, I think it goes along with the deed, and I think that was one of the requests in the Conservation Commission's letter, that there's something that travels with the property regarding the special exception and the variance.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Boucher?
And again, just for my clarification, you mentioned that if we were to favorably recommend this, to pass this, then your next step would be to apply to the state, to the shoreline protection?
That's correct.
Could you explain in detail, or not in detail, but in summary, what's the difference between that and our Conservation Commission? What is it that they're approving, and at what level?
Sure. Yep. So, so the State Shoreline Water Quality Protection Act has jurisdiction over water bodies of the state, including fourth-order streams. The setback is a 50-foot vegetated buffer, and it's also from the primary setback line for the building setback. So we exceed that 50-foot setback, so we meet their requirements there. As far as the buffer, we're going to meet all of their requirements. We don't propose any new disturbance within that 50-foot buffer area. They also have a jurisdiction over what they call the woodland buffer, which is 150 feet, between 50 and 150 feet. Again, these lots being combined, we're going to have a very large area, undeveloped, untouched. This whole area, this whole lot, almost entirely is going to remain untouched. And that basically goes towards, they have a point score system. I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but there's a lot of points as far as the tree sizes. It's fairly detailed on the information that they're looking for on 25-foot grids on the number of trees along the buffer. You're required to maintain those. You're required to, if you're disturbing them, prove that you are meeting their requirements, and that if you do if you don't meet them and you're proposing not to meet them, then you have to offset that with additional erosion control features, stormwater management plans, a lot of stuff that we've actually are already doing with this plan through the city.
Ms. Vitale?
For swales that are being proposed, what's the lifespan of a swale when you get significant water flow down?
I guess it depends on what significant is. I mean, it's a swale is essentially just a ditch in the ground. So, you know, periodically, if you get erosion, I don't foresee a lot of erosion here because it's relatively flat. You're not going to have a lot of energy transferring soils through this area. You have a very small watershed, essentially just the front yard to the roadway. So it's the lifespan of the house, essentially. You may have, if you have a really strange storm event or something happens, you might get some sediment built up in there that's you may want to remove. There is some very minor maintenance if you do get sediment in there. But again, there's really no point source here. It's really just the front yard, the building and the driveway that would be contributing to that flow.
Is that going to be on a slab? Is it going to be higher than the road?
No, it's a full basement, but it's going to be, if you look at the contours here, it's going to be just about a foot. The road is about 162, and we're proposing 162 at the house, so it's the same elevation. The foundation will be up a little bit just to make sure that the water sheds away from the home.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think we're all set. Let me just, guess one other point, I just reiterate what you said about one of the folks was speaking about the development of Maplewood. And while it's disappointing to hear that there's increased runoff, because there shouldn't be, I just wanted to reiterate what you said, that that's a condition that we're
Right.
not supposed to hold liable to this piece of property, the water coming from the other side of the street from Maplewood.
Right. I mean, we obviously haven't done any type of hydraulic testing on, abutting properties. But I do know that, all the regulations now as far as site development goes, they require that the post-development not exceed the pre-development. So that's part of what we've done here is to regrade this to make sure and run the calculations so that all the infiltration remains on site and doesn't flow off the site. I think that those regulations have been in place for a long time, but they may not have been enforced as much as they should. I can tell you from many of the projects we're working on now through the alteration of terrain, this doesn't qualify for that, but the state is very active in making sure that those regulations are followed.
All right, I don't think there's any other questions. Thanks for your testimony.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Pierce or Mr. Jack, one of you has the right to come back if you'd like to present discussion about what we've just heard. And I could ask you for your name and address in the record so the transcriber gets it.
My name is Andrea Pierce, and I'm the owner and resident at 14 Curtis Drive in Nashua. We're curious, we have some questions. What is the square footage of the home that's to be built?
Let me,
Does it say on your?
do you have that by chance? Technically, the questions are supposed to be
I'm asking because
exhaustive, but
he's
let's get
stating
it,
that
let's get
they'll.
them asked, let's see if we can get them answered for you. If not, well, keep going, let me.
It's 26 by 38, and then a two-car garage next to it.
We asked because he states it's going to be like matching, like kind houses to what we already have on the street, so we're curious what the square footage of that house is going to be.
I'm just
The footprint looks comparable to the few other houses around, so.
I'm just taking 26 by 38 is 988 square feet for a two-story. So about 2,000 square feet of house and a two-car garage is what's on the plan.
We're curious if there's going to be perk testing for the well, and if that's going to be disclosed to us to make sure that if they are putting a well there, that
Well,
the testing
I
is going
think,
to be.
as Mr. Falk said, that's a requirement to perk test for the well.
Propane or electric? So
For
we
heat?
know.
I don't know the answer to that.
If the water table goes up and there is flooding, and then that makes it so that now our homes now have to have flood coverage, that would be a hardship for all of us in the neighborhood. We are currently not in a flood zone. All the houses that are currently built there were built up above the grade, hence the water table issues that we're having now because of the change in water, but initially they were all built higher up, and this one seems to be being at level or below. So we're concerned about that, and yeah, that was it. That's all I have.
All right, thanks. Any questions for Ms. Pierce? Okay. I think the only question we couldn't answer was whether it's propane or electric, but on the other hand, I'm going to say, I don't think that's germane to what we're looking at tonight, which is, whether or not we approve a house that goes there. All right, thank you for that. You could have a seat, and with that, I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. And who would like to jump in first? Ms. Vitale?
My biggest concern, of course, is that the whole home is within that buffer area. That's, as far as the 25-foot that was asked for by the Conservation Commission, that seems reasonable on that part, but it's the actual building of the home itself that is my main concern. And, how to, if it was approved, how to follow some of the restrictions that were given to the property as it's proposed right now.
All
I'd like
right.
to hear everybody else's thoughts.
Sure.
because-
Mr. Lionel, mind if we go clockwise here?
Yeah. The 25 feet setback, that doesn't bother me, but like Ms. Vitale, I'm not really happy with building anything on that side of the street. I spent some time looking at it, and we've had some testimony of drainage issues and water issues in the area, and it's just awfully close to the brook, to vegetation. We have the letter from the other neighbor, Mr. O'Neill, about the wildlife in the area that would definitely be disturbed by having a house there, even if there was reconstruction of some of the plantings in back. I don't think that I'll get this right. I don't believe that a property owner has the unrestricted right to develop property that they bought, that if, when they bought it, it was not something they could build a house on, that we have testimony that it was bought as just a land lot and not as a house lot. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but that's the testimony that we have. I'm not comfortable with this.
All right. Mr. Welsh?
Yeah.
I'm kind of going the other direction. As I don't love the idea of seeing a house on that lot, but after hearing the testimony of the engineer, kind of talking through the plans, the drainage, I understand. You know, and I understand the concerns about the drainage and what that, you know, what a house may or may not do to that, but, you know, going back to the Conservation Commission and their report and their requirements, they're the ones that ultimately oversee the impact. So, I mean, I understand the concerns, but given between the engineer and the Conservation Commission, I don't have an issue with it.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher?
I asked several questions from the engineer, just to clarify a lot of the questions I had in my mind, and to come to, you know, a conclusion that I would, after reading the Conservation Commission minutes, you know, they are a, you know, they do give us advice. Their word is not, you know, we can follow it or not follow it. But I think that, you know, as yourself being on the Conservation Commission, I know that they spend a lot of time and a lot of work going through these things, and
Years ago, not.
years ago. But you still have that knowledge, right? You never lose that knowledge. So, so with the wetland scientist confirming several points, and the work that goes into that, and the fact that, you know, that this is his livelihood. So again, you know, sometimes we have the impression that maybe we can turn things into what we want them to be so that we can justify the end result. But I think that in these cases, and we've seen other cases like this, but again, this is unique as it stands itself, I think there's a lot of engineering that went into how to place this house, what to do with the on-site mitigation of water and trying to protect what's there. So undoubtedly, and living in this city for a long time, I know the areas that are prone to flooding and there are issues with. And, you know, we see that, you know, in the neighborhoods behind, you know, the dealerships on Daniel Webster Highway. We see that in other areas. We see this along this area. We've heard people talk about the flooding and the lack of drainage. But this is a fact that exists, unfortunately, in some parts of the city. I think that, you know, the difference between now and probably many, many years ago is the painstakingly, you know, we take a lot of time to mitigate that, what's going on in that lot. So, you know, science has come a long way since. So what I hear and what I am basing my decision on is that we have an expert here in the room that has testified that the impact will be no worse than what exists. So this is what they have to do. So the impact to the neighborhood would be no worse. I am completely favorable in the to have the 25-foot setback instead of the 40. I think as much as we can pull that home away from the body of water is great. You know, there's questions about, well, what happens, that the house is gonna be built, and then all of a sudden it's built, everybody goes away, what happens? I think it's very clear in stipulation 10 of the Conservation Commission that if we approve, we're approving these stipulations that, you know, one of the things here is that there's a report that has to be made every year, has to be done on December 31st, a report on like monitoring invasive species, such like, and submitting those findings. There's other things here that are being conveyed that have to be done. So it's not something that can be ignored. We've heard testimony, again, that the deed is going to pretty much spell out that basically there's really no activities allowed in the back of that property. So I have every faith that with implementing this, with what the scientist has proposed, and the fact that, again, now this has to reach another hurdle, right, with the state. So there's another hurdle that has to be met with the state. And again, they're not in the business of making homeowners happy, right, or landowners happy. They're in the business of protecting our natural resources. So I think that, obviously, they would like our approval so they can move forward with that. Again, if it stops there, it stops there. They can't move any further without that go ahead from the state. With all these things going on, what I'm basically saying is that I feel comfortable with the home being placed where it is. I think that the situation with the runoff and everything that Mrs. Pierce is seeing is undoubtedly the truth. I drove down there. I saw what's going on. And again, I think that those are conditions that exist. And if if the testimony is by an expert that by putting this home here, we are not going to, that home is not going to add to that situation, and has defined it and proved it out and done those measurements, then I am basing my opinion and decision on the facts that were presented by the expert, notwithstanding the pictures that we saw and the existing condition of the area. So with that, I will support the application.
Thank you. Ms. Borres?
I'm actually, I actually flip-flopped, to be honest with you, but based on the testimony of Representative Jacks and Andrea Pierce and the letter from Chris O'Neill, I'm in agreement with them that I would be opposed to the variance of building this home and disrupting the wildlife, against the conservation that's protecting that area with the excessive flooding. I'm not in agreement, I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. Ms. McKay?
This case is extremely complex, and without being flip or, sounding, I don't know, again, flip, I was almost underwater on this. I'm way over my head trying to figure things out. But Mr. Boucher always manages to ask questions that will get answers for my questions that he doesn't even know exist. The engineer brought about information that was extremely beneficial to understand that your name, your reputation, you have limits of liability attached to what you're saying and what you're doing. It's not just very casual. You're doing a study that has to be credible and is verifiable. The Conservation Commission, when these types of situations come up, I look to, because they're the ones, if there's going to be an obstacle and obstruction, they're the ones that are going to point it out, and they're going to either bless it or deny it, and I've seen them do both. In their report, one of the things that I noticed right away was number 6. The project manager is to be listed as a member of the Conservation Commission, which means the Conservation Commission is going to have their finger on this pie continuously throughout the entire process, which is, aside from being a feel-good, it's very logical, it's credible, and again, it gives you faith. While I understand the letter that Mr. O'Neill wrote, while I understand Representative Jack's comments and Andrea Pierce, I think that as I listened and went back and forth, I think that what is trying to be done and what is being attempted has eliminated the barriers and the hurdles And I'm leaning in a favorable position, knowing that there's still another hurdle that has to be accomplished. And should that block the process, then it's not going to happen. I think if you clear all the hurdles and you meet all the barriers, and I don't think that the builders won't be in conversation with the neighbors and making sure things are fine. I think then that sometimes we have to look to the experts and say, okay, we agree, and that's my opinion.
Thank you. My thoughts, this definitely is a struggle with the balance between, as I see it, between landowner rights and, preserving a wetland buffer. So, in general, I guess I'd say I'm falling in favor of this application, and let me speak to that. And I put a lot of faith in what the Conservation Commission comes up with, and for me, it's got to be a very strong reason to overturn that, or to say, well, I think they got it wrong. I am surprised, it was unclear to me till tonight that the majority of the lot is in the 75-foot wetland buffer, because that is a dash with 3 dots, and the engineer clarified it. But on the other hand, the land where the house is proposed is about six feet here, or 5 feet higher, so it does go up quite a bit. So a couple things to Mr. O'Neill's letter. I mean, I agree that a house going up on that side of the street is a big change for the neighbors on the other side of the street, if a house goes up. That is, I mean, there's no doubt if I lived, or anybody, I think any of us lived on the other side of the street, we'd rather have the natural view, than a house going up. The struggle I have is these were lots of record, and I don't distinguish between a house lot or a land lot. They were defined as lots when people bought them, which was well before the wetland legislation went in, which was about 1993, I think. These were lots of record of 1970. So that is a compelling element for me, because, I guess I could put a line in the sand and say, well, the wetland laws are what they are, and you don't have any development rights there. But on the other hand, 2 lots have been consolidated here, and I think that's a pretty important consolidation. It's to allow one house to go in. If this wanted to be developed prior to our wetland laws, there could be a house pretty much opposing every house on the other side of the street. And so I guess to Mr. O'Neill's point of view, I understand that he would prefer not to see a house on this side of the street. I agree with that. I think there'll be a disruption of wildlife, quite frankly, as time goes on. I think the wildlife is going to disrupt the homeowner here, because there's not just one beaver there. There's a lot of beavers. There's a lot of muskrat. I live on the brook, and fortunately, it's a very robust, a lot of critters there that don't leave the neighbors alone. I was concerned to hear the testimony about the flooding on this street, and I believe that to be the case. I believe it to be exacerbated here since the development of Maplewood. But I also feel that this house isn't going to be like a dam to the water that seems to be coming downhill. I don't think this is going to prevent that. I don't think it's going to cause additional flooding on the street. This lot is going to drain into the brook. I was certainly concerned when I thought there was going to be a septic on site, but it's going to be, I didn't realize till tonight that there's a sewer line running down the street. I'm sure that's the one that continues right down in front of my house and another mile or so down the road. So, in summary, I think the Conservation Commission, while I'm surprised that, they gave an approval for most of the lot within the 75-foot wetlands, there's quite a few stipulations. I think they're keeping close to it, and I'm not at the point where I think I should countermand that. So I'm favorable to it, but I'm open. Ms. Vitale?
Mr. Falk, if Linda Bretz leaves that position, what's the process in place that somebody else takes her position to follow through on where she is named as the person? I'm just trying to look at that, which number that is. But she is the person that is named to do the report and do the checking. Who would take her place?
This is 20, that's,
Yeah.
The letter says the project manager is to be listed as a member of the Conservation Commission. I don't know if,
And then.
Yeah, I think the
Number
letter you're looking at
6.
was on 2006. That's back when
she's not on it anymore.
Linda was the chair.
Okay, that's what it is.
She doesn't live in
Okay.
the state.
So that
Yeah,
was
so-
the other one. I'm sorry, I didn't see the date on that. Okay, so it would be the current person. We know that our buffers, we're a higher standard than the state, am I correct? You know,
Well, Nashua has assigned a 75, in the early 1990s, it had assigned Salmon Brook as a prime wetland, and a prime wetland has a 75-foot buffer. So there's, prime is prime, it's the highest of 3
Right.
levels that, Nashua has prime, critical, and other. And Salmon Brook is a prime in that 75-foot wetland buffer.
I'm really concerned that this opens up for those other locations in the city that building would happen. And I know that there are places within that 75-foot area now. But as I heard many times sitting on the Conservation Commission, that was going to be an issue down the road, and I think this is one of those issues that we're seeing right now. And I appreciate the work that's put in to help in building those areas, but they work right at that time. But water is just one of those things that can take over anything. I don't think working within this area is in the best interest of moving forward, either in this location or some of those other places that are lots within the city that we question. If it was a portion of the lot, maybe I can see it because you're pulling out, but we're talking about building the entire house within the buffer. To me, that's entirely different than, a portion of the backyard, or, to me, it's entirely different. I've seen places, I'm trying to think of the road, we had to go back because they wouldn't cut down trees, and it was in that buffer area. I just see it opening it up to problems in the future. And I just cannot, in good conscience, vote in the affirmative on that. And I respect the Conservation Commission completely, but I believe that buffer is there for a reason, and this seems to fall over the edge of how I could see if we could do the approval. I just don't. I'm okay with the 25-foot on that part, but not on the building of the lot within the buffer.
All right, thank you. Any other thoughts? Anybody want to jump in? If not, the call for a motion. Again, the 5 voting members are Vitale, Lionel, Shea, Ms. McKay and myself.
Would you make the motion? I think that he would, I'd appreciate it.
Because you're the, okay, I'm gonna hazard a motion, let me,
Sign the special exception.
yeah, I think, I will make, or the board should make a motion on the special exception first. So I will make a motion on that. I'll make a motion to approve the special exception, and that's to work within the 75-foot prime wetland buffer of Salmon Brook. Working within a wetland buffer is an approved special exception. That's Land Use Code 190-112. I think the special exception will not create undue traffic or unduly impair pedestrian safety. I don't believe it'll overload public water. I don't think it'll have an impact on the drainage. I don't think it'll have a negative impact on the drainage on Curtis Drive. The special regulations, in the application, the 7 special regulations by written testimony are fulfilled. I think that perhaps I make this motion, it's probably not in unison of the board, but I believe that the 9 criteria are adequately met. And while it's a change to the neighborhood, I think having a home on this combined lots, or combining the 2 lots and having a home is not out of character of the neighborhood. I think it's certainly a change to the neighborhood, but I don't think it's out of character of the neighborhood, and I don't think it'll be to the detriment of health, morals, or welfare of the residents. And I know from the testimony that's not a universal thought of the voting members tonight, but that's what I believe, and I put out the motion to approve the special exception. So that my motion is to approve. Is there a second to the motion? Mr. Boucher, any discussion on the motion? Show of hands in favor of the motion. That would be 3.
Concom's 11.
Oh, yeah, I guess if, let me just clarify that. If, let me just hold on that vote and say, I just want to like to amend my motion that this motion includes the January 3rd approval letter from the National Conservation Commission and the 11 stipulations. And also like to include on our record, the record of the Conservation Commission minutes. Should this proceed further, the court would clarify that. So I'd like to amend my motion to include the January 3rd letter. So is there a second to my amended motion? So that's seconded by Mr. Boucher. Any discussion on the motion? Show of hands in favor of the amended motion. So that's Boucher, yourself, and myself. And opposed is Mr. Lionel and Ms. Vitale. So that motion carries 3-2. Let me charge ahead. I'll also, I make a motion, let me just flip the page here, bear with me, please. Yeah. I'll make a motion to approve the variance to encroach 15 feet into the 40-foot required front yard setback. I make a motion to approve this area variance because I believe the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property. Initially, the applicant didn't propose to have this front yard encroachment. The front yard encroachment was requested by the Conservation Commission to provide a greater buffer in the back of the house. I believe that this I believe the 14-foot encroachment in the front yard isn't out of character with the houses on the street. As I look at the street, I think by testimony, there's some varying front yards lengths. So this depth, I don't think is unreasonable, and I therefore think it's within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. I think having a home here, I think there's ultimately no impact on the value of surrounding properties. We've heard conflicting testimony of that. And I don't believe it's contrary to public interest, and certainly I largely make this motion because I think substantial justice is done to the landowner of this lot of record. So I make a motion to approve the variance for the 14-foot encroachment. And Mr. Boucher's hand is in the air to second that.
Discussion,
Pardon?
discussion.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Yes, just to clarify, and I know we are assuming this, but it's to combine two lots, right?
Yes.
I know that we're assuming that, but I just want to make sure it's on record.
Yep. Yes, just so, per the testimony, the history of this is that what's before us tonight is a combination of two lots to result in one usable lot if it makes it through this board. So we have a motion on the table again to approve the variance. Any other discussion on the motion? Show of hands in favor of the motion. It's the same three, and opposed is Mr. Lionel and Ms. Vitale. So, folks, that motion carries. Thanks for your attention. And with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 1.
So we got a 30-day window of appeal.
What's that?
30-day window of appeal.
Sorry?
30-day window of appeal.
Oh, yeah, I didn't mention during the rules that every case that we rule on tonight, there's a 30-day window of appeal. And that's very important because every case that we weigh on, whether we vote affirmative or negative, there's a 30-day window of appeal. And if any party has a grievance, the next step for that party would be to file a request to rehear the case. So any party of standing has 30 days to file a rehearing request. If a rehearing request is received, this board will act on it promptly, one way or the other. And if this board approves the rehearing request, then the decision is stayed, and the case kind of goes back to step 1, and it's reheard again. If the rehearing request is not, if one is received and the board decides that it doesn't find merit in the rehearing request, then the next step would be to take your matter directly to Hillsborough County Superior Court. So again, there's a 30-day window of appeal on every decision we make this evening. And if you have any questions on that, you could just give Mr. Falk a call tomorrow. He could walk you through any questions you have. So are we good to keep going? All right. Well, I'd like to open the public hearing on case number 2. Let me read that into the record. And the address is 393 Main Street. The owner is Charlotte Thibault Revocable Trust. The applicant is John Stewart. We have, first is a use variance to convert an existing 2-family dwelling into a 4-unit family dwelling. And then we also have a minimum land area. The minimum land area for 4 units is 29,040 square feet. The lot is 14,323 square feet. And then the third variance is an encroachment up to 14 feet from the 25-foot required front yard setback on both East Dunstable and Main Street to create 3 parking spaces of an existing driveway. Hi, good evening. If you could give us your name and address and walk us through your application.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Tom Burns. I am a project engineer with TF Moran. We are a civil survey firm, a consulting firm in Bedford, New Hampshire, located at 48 Constitution Drive. I'm here tonight on behalf of the owner, the Charlotte Thibault Revocable Trust, as well as the applicant, John Stewart, who is a member of the Thibault family, regarding the property that they have owned for approximately 100 years, located at 393 Main Street. The residence in question is an existing 3-level, 10-bedroom home that is located at the intersection of Main Street and East Dunstable. It's presently occupied by the family. It had previous zoning approval to allow for two family units as permitted in the urban residential zone. And as the chair just outlined, we're here tonight seeking a variance to allow for the use of the home as a four-family structure. There would be no additional construction on the home as part of that. The existing home as it is, as a 10-bedroom structure, can support the four families that the owner and applicant are seeking for it. Separately, as noted, while the parking that is available on the site as it exists today could support the 4 units as it stands, we are proposing 3 additional spaces of angled parking coming off of the northerlymost through driveway that connects from East Dunstable to Main Street, which would allow for additional parking there, but also the opportunity to eliminate some instances of potential for vehicles backing out onto either road. Looking at the first variances being those relative to the use of the structure, again, based on the size of the structure itself having 10 bedrooms in it, we feel the request is a reasonable one that is in keeping within the spirit of the ordinance, as both the lot and the structure itself as it currently stands could easily support those 4 units without alteration to the structure, without alteration to the existing landscape of the site itself. There would be no negative impact to public health or safety based on the addition of that, and relative to the surrounding neighborhood, because we currently have a mix in this zone of both single-family and multifamily homes on properties both on Main Street and East Dunstable, and the city's eventual master planning for the site to become a medium-density parcel, or the future outlook for the site. We feel that it would be reasonable in keeping with the character of the neighborhood without diminishing the value of surrounding properties. Relative to whether or not this is the hardship that the current ordinance, or the spirit of the ordinance currently creates for the parcel, in looking at it, again, it's a 10-bedroom house that's zoned currently, that the maximum zoning allows for 2 families, and the idea being that the potential, it creates a difficult situation, one for the existing family that's there to be able to occupy it and reasonably use a home that has 10 bedrooms in it, no matter how large the family is. And even at two family units right now, having 1 unit is currently 6 bedrooms, the other is 4 bedrooms. These are large units to find to occupy, whereas further breaking it down to the 4 units makes potential for a more reasonable use for the structure itself. Looking at the driveway, again, the request for an encroachment into the setback to allow for construction of the 3 additional parking spaces. As it stands right now, the structure has a 2-car garage, as well as an additional parking pad that was put in at the time when the unit was zoned when the unit was expanded to allow for 2 families there. There were 3 available parking spaces there. The existing southerlymost driveway could accommodate additional parking there as well, and then the pull-through driveway as it stands can accommodate 3 vehicles on it. Again, looking at the site, and when we were considering this proposal to go to a 4-family, it provided the opportunity to take a look at that parking, and particularly on that front pull-through where you could put 3 vehicles parking on there. You have the potential of having vehicles that are both head-in if you're coming from either street and potentially blocking, and now you're backing. Users would be backing out on the street. I can speak from experience. The first time I visited the site, I came in and did the exact situation. I pulled in, there was a vehicle head in the other way and had to back out. This, by putting these additional angled parking, what we're able to do is accommodate basically pull-through parking coming in off of East Dunstable, pulling into the angled spaces. You're backing out, staying on the property, on the driveway, and then pulling out of the site. So you're eliminating that backing out onto either street from that driveway. And again, while the parking as it stands today can support the required parking based on the land use code for the 4 units, this would improve the parking situation. So in that instance, in looking at that parking versus as it would stand if it remained, you're in this sense you are improving the vehicle circulation there and on the surrounding streets, which is a benefit to the surrounding neighborhood and surrounding properties. It's not creating a hazard in that instance. It's actually reducing any traffic concerns in that area, getting out to the signaled intersection, because again, you're eliminating vehicles that are backing out onto the streets to make their movements. Because of the nature of the setback and being on a corner lot, because there are 25-foot setbacks on the frontage all the way around that northern rounding where the intersection is, and on either street, you're essentially creating the front setbacks, which are encompassing that whole area. So in essence, any work on that driveway requires a variance in that setback. So in that essence, the nature of the setbacks and the kind of the unique shape of the lot in that area is restrictive for the lot. So this is, in the nature of it, we feel it's a reasonable request, and that, again, it's creating an improvement. Any work in that area requires a request for variance on that driveway, but ultimately it's work that has both a benefit to the property owner, but also to the surrounding neighborhood if we can improve some of the traffic with it. And I think at that point, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board or the public might have on it.
Mr. Lionel, take it away.
Okay, you got 10 bedrooms, that's great. How many bathrooms are there currently? I assume that there would be, I don't know how you're planning on dividing it. I would assume that each of the units would need its own kitchen area that would need to be constructed. What are your plans there?
Hello and good afternoon, good evening. My name is John Stewart. I'm the applicant. The address for my applicant is 292 Route 101 in Bedford, New Hampshire. To answer your question, sir, right now there's 4 bathrooms. 3 are full, 1 is a half bath. There will be the additional 1 bathroom downstairs and 1 bathroom on the 3rd floor. In addition, a kitchen as well on 2 separate levels. The 10 bedrooms will be easily divided up. 2 of the bedrooms are very, very large, so they'll be easily divided up, and one of them becoming a kitchen as well. And the house, without a question, supports that.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant? Ms. Vitale, go ahead.
Where are you proposing the 3 additional spaces?
Yes.
At that northern part? I know that you have them as angled. Is there any, about pulling out one way or the other? Right-hand turns out of a driveway is one thing, and I know that's more of a planning board issue, but I'm just thinking of in terms of the 3 spaces you showed as an angle, so makes it look like you're going to back up and always go out one direction.
That's the idea of it, and again, it's the way to kind of eliminate any confusion coming in and out is to control the vehicle movement. So the idea would be that if a vehicle's coming in off of East Dunstable, they pull into that parking, which is why it's angled in that manner, and then they would back out of their spaces and then pull through to exit onto Main. So it controls the movements of it. And
So nobody goes downtown to make the right-hand turn. That's why I was to make the left out of there. Can it be all straight-in parking? So you could
yes,
do right-hand turns off of each side?
It could be, yeah. And it's worth noting that because the proposal is for greater than 3 units in here, we will be going to planning board with it, pending the outcome of this evening. We would go to planning board where, we will have to look at trip generation, which for the addition of 2 units, you're looking at approximately 4 trips in a peak hour. But this will be, design review will be part of that with the planning board and with planning staff. So it may ultimately be that, we have to look at that with staff to find the best way to control vehicles in and out, and they may want us to change that layout, but the number of spaces, I think either way would be held to 3, and they really can't fit more than that.
I guess I have a question. It seems to me there's like a lot of large houses, on Main Street. particularly south, you know, as you go towards Haywards. And when you say there's 10 bedrooms, I mean, I'm sure there is that untypical, or is that typical of homes in this neighborhood?
Based on looking just at the assessor's page for some of the surrounding properties to get an idea of some of the uses, it seemed to be larger than what I had seen. I believe I saw some that were 6. I think was like the highest that I had seen when I was picking through. But I could be, there could be others of that size, but it's certainly the largest that I'd seen when I was looking through them, looking at the properties going north and south on Main, and then as well as on East Dunstable.
All right, thank you.
It certainly was spacious inside. When I walked through, I was surprised going in there how many rooms there were and how much size there was in that house for.
So I think the proposal was 2 of the large bedrooms would be trimmed down and have kitchens added where they are.
Yes, sir, that's correct. We've had an architectural firm out of Bedford as well working on it. The downstairs was built as my great-grandparents' bedroom when they first bought the house, and it was expanded over the years, to which my grandmother, my great-aunt, Charlotte Thibault, she lived in it for the last 20 to 30 years. How long the structure has been in that capacity, I couldn't tell you. I don't really remember. I mean, I was probably in high school at the time when that structure was built. That particular part of the bedroom is a very large bedroom. That would be easily transferable into a 2-bedroom plus a kitchen. That's how large it is, and there's also a full bathroom. On the second and third floor, the proposal is to have 2 bedrooms on the third and a kitchen and 2 bedrooms on the second floor as one unit. Very large unit, again, a 4-bedroom unit, and then so it'd be a couple of 2 bedrooms and 1 4-bedroom and 1 3-bedroom unit, plus a 2-car garage. The house is very large. It's there would be two kitchens added. Both of them would be coming from a space that's currently occupied as a bedroom, and it would making sure that, again, it's my family's house, so everything that goes into this house is going to be, top notch, and we want to make sure that we keep a very good look to the house because, there's no reason I would ever want to, take away the value or the integrity of my family's house after 100 years.
So the outside of the house, there's no proposed changes to it, other than the driveway?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for the applicant? I think we're all set. Let's see what we hear.
Thank you.
Was there anybody else here tonight who'd like to speak in favor of this proposed application at 393 Main Street? Is there anyone with questions or concerns or opposition? I see a, ma'am, if you'd like to come up and just give us your name and address, and we're just lay people, so don't be nervous.
Thank you. I'm Cynthia Gale. I live at 4 Catherine Street here in Nashua, which Catherine Street is, I can look at the top and I can see this absolutely beautiful home that it makes me sad that the integrity of the exterior. Inside doesn't matter. I'm not going to see inside, but the integrity of the outside is going to change. I'm asking if I could present this petition of those people who are here in attendance who have signed in opposition.
Sure, you could
This-
just give that to Ms. Vitale, and that'll make its way around the table here. Wait, do we have any questions for Ms. Gale? I have a question for you. Oh my gosh, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Is it safe to say that the folks who have signed that petition feel the same way you do? That's the integrity of the outside, or?
I believe so.
Okay. All right. I mean, I think, all right, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any, no other questions? Was there anybody else who was here to speak in opposition? Sir, if you'd like to come up and give us your name and address? Yes, just take the microphone with you so we don't miss any.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Like one to be passed around, or?
Can we see it okay? I think.
Yeah, I have it here.
Okay.
It'll be passed around.
Well, my name is Joe DeLuca. I live at 21 Clement Street in Nashua, not far from that residence. And upon reading of the proposal and the site analysis of the variance requested regarding the property located at 393 Main Street, the following is addressed in respect to the applicant. He is saying that he doesn't want any unnecessary hardship if we don't allow.
Could you maybe speak a little closer?
Okay.
Thank you.
That the alterations will in fact observe the spirit of the ordinance and not diminish the value of the surrounding properties, not be contrary to the public interest. It is believed at this time it is a two-family and it's going to be put into a four-family. And to impose a parking lot in the front, spaces in the front yard will greatly decrease the green space. I know the property well, I've worked on it, and there's very little green space. I mean, it's got sidewalks and paved areas and everything. It's small. It's very well kept, though. But in also in regard to safety, it's a very high traffic area there. To get in and out, I've plowed the driveway. I mean, just between 6 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, it's hard to get in and out of that parking area. But anyways, also the lot is already very, very tight. I just said that, with dwelling structure that's there, the existing asphalt, driveway areas, existing walkways that are there. Even more in regard to safety, though, if there's children playing out there, if you've got renting and you have children there, it's a tight place for kids to play. There's no place to play if you put extra parking in. It's actually the only green space that's got any size is right in the front, right there. So anyways, that's even more paramount from a safety standpoint, not even just with the traffic. But also in respect to the spirit of the ordinance, which is the reasons of safety, protecting the property value, public interest, these modifications are truly and totally out of character with the, and create more liability, not to lessen the applicant's state. He says it's going to lessen the load. It's going to be easier to drive in and out. Maybe easy to drive in and out, having cars parked like that they don't have to head onto each other, but just getting in and out of there now and adding more cars is an extreme case. Not to mention, though, this is one of the last stately, focal, and particularly well-kept, high visibility properties you see as you're heading out of the city of Nashua down Danny Webster Highway. And it's a very good-looking piece of property, and it's very complementary to the city as it stands. I mean, you go to the north end, you've got a lot of beautiful homes on the north end. This one here it's like saying goodbye. It's got Nashua, old school, heading out. And it does diminish, it's going to, the look, having cars parked right in the front of it for parking is going to definitely diminish the look and, devaluate people around you, because that property is a state. There are also, let's see, I've already, they mentioned that, there's all the parking already down for the two-car garage, it's under the structure, and, I'm going to put it there, I've already said enough of that. I don't believe there's any necessary hardship if we don't agree and we don't give them the variances. I mean, there's enough case for someone here to make enough money on a two-family. It's, everybody wants to get all they can out of something. But I think what it's stated right now and the way it stands right now, it's well enough to earn a good income with two families, to cover your taxes and what, I know I have rental property. And I also know there's been cases in the past where variances have been, for much lesser impacts, variances have been requested and the city of Nashua has denied them. So anyways, I oppose the request to the variances as applied by the applicant, and in such that he should be very proud to have a beautiful property like this and not really want to diminish the value of the property. Again, my name's Joe DeLuca at 21 Clement Street, and I thank the board and the city of Nashua for the opportunity to give these public addresses, and I'm very blessed to live in this city and very proud to be in this city. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luca. Are there any questions, Mr. Luca? I think we're all set. Thank you for your testimony. Was there anybody else with questions, concerns, or opposition? I see a fella, is he coming up here to speak? Say we have a fella here, and was there anybody else who was going to speak after this gentleman? I think this lady, so we have two more folks here. Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Diane Koutzis, and I reside at 3 East Dunstable Road in Nashua, New Hampshire. My home is located 2 houses down and across the street from 393 Main Street. I am here to speak against granting Mr. Stewart a variance to turn the stately and highly visible home located at 393 Main Street into a 4-unit family dwelling. The character of the neighborhood does not reflect multifamily use. This variance would negatively impact property values and decrease the desirability of our neighborhood. One can only assume that a 4-family home would also have 8 vehicles on the property. In my opinion, the size and the shape of the parcel does not lend itself to providing adequate parking and would create chaos and possibly impact public safety. I speak to you this evening to strongly encourage and recommend that this variance be denied. It is critical to preserve the character of our neighborhood and to establish a precedent for similar variance requests in the future. I thank you for your time.
Thanks. Any questions? Actually, ma'am, we have a question for you. Mr. Boucher does.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
I think that one of the concerns, big concerns, is the parking, the amount of vehicles that would be there. So as I'm thinking about it, and again, I'm just looking at it, you know, from a very generic type of view, and you know, just listening to everything that's being said. It's a 10-bedroom structure, right, as testified?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just asking you, you know, what your thoughts are, and again, where you're coming from. Let's say that this is a 1-family or 2-family as it is now, and all those bedrooms are occupied by adults that live there, that all have cars. So, you know, I know that you mentioned there could be 8 vehicles there, and I know it's on the corner, it's very visible. But the way it stands now, if people were to move in and occupy all that space, the possibility is very great that there would be at least 8 vehicles there.
Correct.
So, again, is your testimony, I heard what you said, is there a lot of concern that you have for the amount of vehicles that are there, that would be there because of the 4-family, or just in general, the amount of vehicles that would be there?
No, my concern is just, it's the safety of the public. It's a highly, people walk around that area constantly, strollers, mothers with strollers, joggers. A lot of college kids are up and around that area. And I just feel that it is a very, very tight lot, and having that many vehicles on this property trying to get in and out, it just wouldn't have a very good impact on.
Right. I hear you, and I don't disagree with you at all. I guess what I'm suggesting is that if this house were to be utilized fully with all the bedrooms, that there would be at least 8 cars there. So, follow what I'm saying, so that the concern that you have would be legitimate and would be there no matter if this were in front of us or not. I mean, would you agree with that or disagree?
Yes, I guess I would agree with that.
And I'm not forcing you to disagree. I'm just wanting to bring out a different point,
Right.
that it is possible that this situation could exist without this applicant coming forward. And I do agree with you that where that driveway is, it's very close to a major intersection. It's busy there, and we know how busy it is in the afternoon
Absolutely.
And there's only a few times where there's a lull there, but I do agree. So thank you very much for coming.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, thank
Any
you.
other questions for Ms. Karitzis? I think we're all set. Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, could I distribute some research folders?
Sure.
to the members of the board?
Yeah, if you'd just give them this Vitale and she'll pass them out. If you'd like, yeah. Take it away.
Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Mr. Falk. My name is Michael Siciliano. I live at 95 Taylor Street, Nashua, New Hampshire, where I have lived in the south end of Nashua, the Main Street neighborhood, for over 50 years. I established what I believe to be the neighborhood by walking south from the 393 Main Street property towards Hayward's Ice Cream to the intersection of Main Street and Learned Street, which is 1 block away. It's also a visual line of sight from the subject property. I measured the distance with a measuring wheel, and then I obtained the research information by reviewing the Nashua Regional Planning Commission's website and downloading the data to establish the neighborhood radius map, and also the City of Nashua GIS website to establish the neighborhood spreadsheet, of which pages 1 through 5 clearly indicates mathematically the true character of this neighborhood, which is predominantly single-family residences. And you'll see on the top of the page, you have a chart there. You have 149 single-family homes, just over 92%, 10 two-family properties, just over 6%, 2 three-family properties, just over 1%. You have no four-family properties in the 865-foot radius. The spirit of the ordinance and character of the neighborhood it doesn't sit well with me how the applicant has proposed this. The applicant's proposal is not consistent with the spirit of the ordinance and does not fit within the character of the surrounding neighborhood. The application refers to a mix of single and multifamily properties nearby. That claim is not supported by the facts, and I ask you to please see Exhibits A and B attached. Of 161 properties within the 865-foot radius of 393 Main Street, there are, as I just mentioned, the following properties. If you look at the map, the yellow shaded parcels are two-family, the orange shaded parcels are three-family. The balance within that radius, all purple in color, are the balance of the single-family residences. The size of the subject parcel does not justify the increased density sought. The average square foot of the 161 properties in the neighborhood is 13,658 square feet. The parcel contains 14,323 square feet, according to the applicant, or 12,480 square feet, according to the assessor's office. Neither square footage supports an increase in density up to 4 units. If the application were granted, the property would have either 3,120 square feet or 3,582 square feet per unit. In either case, far less than the 7,260 required by code. You will find in the package City of Nashua documents in your folder, such as permit applications, building permits, that as of July 2005, claimed the lot size was 12,480 square feet, and that the structure was previously represented as a single family or a single family with an in-law apartment. Okay? Those are on the building permits and the building applications. As late as April 2004, former building official Ted Evans questioned the classification of the property. His notes are in the folder. You'll find that they indicate that no such records existed showing that the structure was a two-family. And as a matter of fact, he indicates that the assessor's office classified the property as a single family. I asked the board, when was the property approved as a two-family, and which department issued that classification? I will answer any questions that the board may have for me. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Mr. Siciliano? Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Siciliano? Ms. McKay has a question.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. When was this building classified as a two-family? Forgive me if I didn't hear you answer that. I heard you ask it.
I did ask it, and I really don't know. I reviewed the building folder in the planning department, and there are no such documents issued by the ZBA
There's no ZBA discussion. There's no voting from the ZBA turning it from a single family to a two-family. I don't know how the tax assessor's office today classifies it as a two-family. I've been by there thousands of times over my lifetime, and I know many residents have driven by there thousands of times, and we all believed it was a single-family home. For the applicant to present it as a two-family, I'd like to know when it was authorized as a two-family, because his application mentions ZBA decision. It's very vague.
I think it might be a question for the owner or the engineer.
Thank
and
you.
If there are 2 electric meters, that would also help define that. Thank you.
Mr. Lionel, take it away.
Sir.
I was trying to find the city's GIS property card for this property. Unfortunately, my phone couldn't pull it up, and unfortunately, I don't see a copy of it here. What does I assume you've looked at it, because you indicate that according to the card, the house contains a total of 12 rooms. Does it say multifamily, single family? What does it say?
I believe the tax assessor card, as of today, indicates a two-family. However, I'd like to know when that was established. As the applicant indicated, ZBA decision. I didn't see any of that in the folder.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think we're all set at the moment. Thanks for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll just ask one more time. Was there anybody else to speak, questions or concerns? We have 2 more? Okay. Just after those 2, is there anybody else? Because, all right, so it'll be this woman here, this lady, if you'd like to come, and then the fellow with glasses on his forehead there. And again, if we could indulge you for your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Barbara Presley. I live at 11 Orchard Avenue. It's about 1 block away. Practically every time I leave the house, I have the thrill of driving by that house. Although it has not had any historic designation, I think it certainly is eligible for it. I was successful in getting my property, the block away, listed on the state registry, and I think this house is also eligible. The north end of Nashua has all sorts of wonderful properties, and everybody focuses on that's where all the good stuff was built. Well, I beg to differ with you. I've lived up there. We have wonderful properties in the south end, and there are lots of us that would really like to protect some of them. I'd like to call it sort of an anchor property or a special property. The fact that it's on the corner, if you're driving in that direction, you can't help but look at it. I'm sure every one of you has passed by it. To turn it into an investment property with added cars, it would change the whole neighborhood. At that critical point, it would make a huge difference, I think, on the visual enjoyment for the whole city. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Presley? I think we're all set. Thank you for your testimony. And we have our last speaker making his way up in opposition. Hi, good evening.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Carter, how you doing? Attorney Jim Kaklamanis with an office at 374 Main Street in a building that is owned by a trust that I created. Also the property at 376 Main Street across the street from my office, again, in a trust which I created. I consider myself part of the neighborhood there. I'm a lifelong resident of the city. I tell you, if I haven't driven by up and down that street 3 times a day for the past 50 years, I have no idea. I'm underestimating it. My impression all along, all those years, whether it was driving my bike to the A&P when I was working there, or even to the country club to caddy, was that was just one single family home that had been clearly over improved, and it was just one family. And, when you look at the tax, the records at the Registry of Deeds, the public depository of documents in the county, you find that in 1927, the Hools, they bought the property from the original owner, William Sullivan, who in fact I think was once a mayor of the city. And in 1927, the Hools owned it, and it was a large tract of land with that big house on it. And in 1948, they carved out that red house, the 393.5 property. They carved that out, leaving the remainder of 12,000 square feet with the big house. And that eventually is conveyed out in 1986 to, the present owner, Ms. Tebow. I'm thinking that, the fact that there seems to be a lot of concern about, the fact that there's 10 bedrooms in this home. Hey, just because they over-improve the property, why is that going to become my problem? We all take projects on at our home where we improve the property to satisfy our present needs. So they felt that I can't believe it's 10 bedrooms. I wonder if they all have closets in there. But be that as it may, the numbers that were submitted to you by Siciliano, I mean, those are factual information. There's a clear survey of over 160 properties throughout that radius. This is clearly way out of character, and I would urge you to prevent a further expansion or further expansion of a grandfathered use, because this property was there. This predates zoning in the 1950s, and so I would think that would be a bad thing to do. I have nothing further. I'd be more than happy to address any inquiries.
Any questions for Mr. Kakelmanos? We're all set.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for your
much.
testimony. Would the applicant or the engineer for the applicant, you're welcome to come back, encouraged to come back, I guess, to address, the opposition you've heard, and if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you. So just looking at a number of the issues that came up again, a lot of attention was paid to the idea of adding additional pavement, additional parking out there, that it was going to create, granting the variance for the parking was going to create all these additional vehicles on the site and the additional parking. Regarding that, it should be noted that, again, as it stands today, you have the two-car garage, you have a 3-car pad, you have a driveway that leads to that garage that is approximately 2.5 cars wide by better than 2 cars deep, that would allow a minimum of 4 cars parking there. The pull-through driveway from East Dunstable to Main Street right now can fit 3 cars stacked on it. The proposal to add those spaces there, the intent of that is to pull the parking off of the pull-through and give them dedicated spaces as opposed to letting them there. But regardless, the addition of that parking, those 3 spaces isn't adding additional vehicle parking. It's just changing the geometry of how those vehicles will be parked in that front. But as it stands today, 3 vehicles can be parked there. And again, when I've been to the site, there have been 3 vehicles parked out there without issue, except for, again, the idea that you could have head-in parking from both streets, from both directions. Regarding the status of the unit, the City of Nashua's assessor's card lists the property as .287 acres, which is over 14,000 square feet when you do the math on it. It is listed as classified as 2 units with a conventional style building built around 1910. Within the 2 units, it identifies 12 total rooms, including 10 bedrooms, 3 full baths, 1 half bath, 0 3/4 baths. The building has multiple electric meters on it now for multiple units. Again, this is a zone that by right is allowed to have 2 units in it as a multifamily. This has, to the owner's family, this has been used as a multifamily unit. I understand that the abutters may not have realized that, but it has 2 meters on the house. It is classified and approved as, through the city as a 2-unit two-unit residence. Again, regarding the character of the home, the character of the site itself, the structure itself, understanding that, and again, the owner's family has owned this home for a long time, and that's why when they looked at this and looked at the idea of, because the current, or the, I believe it's your great aunt, if I'm not correct, that was living there, who's no longer physically capable of living in the house. This was a situation where does the family no longer own the house because they have nobody to live there now, or is this a potential to hold on to the property and look at something that was reasonable to do in terms of the construction on the inside of the home? This allows them to not alter the outside character of that structure, not to alter the landscape we're talking about. The only change on the site is those 3 spaces that, again, would be in the grassed area off the existing driveway pad. But we're not talking about changing the structure, the character of this house that has been there for all these years. Again, going back, again, it seemed that there was a lot of concern about the number of parking that's on the site. Again, I just want to re-stress that the site as itself can accommodate the parking for 6 units without the addition of those 3 spaces. And if the property were rented as 2 units, was rented as the 2 units by right, you could potentially have just as many vehicles out there. I don't know if you have, can the applicant come up to just?
Sure.
You want to speak on?
I want to say thank you to everyone who turned out this evening. Obviously, I wasn't expecting it, but it's great.
Could I just trouble you get your...
Yes, sir. John Stewart.
So our transcriber...
Yeah, John Stewart at 292 Route 101 in Bedford. Just for the board and for the people who turned out today, I want to make it very clear that I have every intention, if this was approved, I have every intention to keep the great aesthetics of the house. When it comes time to it, a lot of people out there don't realize that an investor who is not in the family wouldn't care. They wouldn't care about the property. They're going to look at it as whatever happens, happens. That's not me. I'd like to buy the house from my family that my great-grandfather purchased. I like to pass it down to my kids. So hopefully 6 generations worth of family will own the house. As someone who, if this doesn't work out and it doesn't happen with me, and the family decides to sell it to an investor, which will most likely happen, they just won't care about the property. I will, I promise you that. My aunt has taken exceptional care of the property. Everyone who's come out today has said how beautiful the house is. I know it's beautiful. I lived in the house. Yes, it's 2-family. It's been 2-family as long as I can remember. We've had tenants in that house. I mean, I'm 35 years old. I can't remember someone not being a tenant in that house. It has 2 meters. Is the parking tight? Yeah, the parking's tight. I mean, I can't do anything about it because the city of Nashua decided to take land from my family over the last 100 years. I mean, there's nothing I can do about that. But I can promise you that I have the best interest in mind with the house because it is my family house.
We have a couple questions here.
Yes, ma'am.
You say you're not going to change the aesthetics in the outside of the home.
Just the 3 parking spots that are proposed.
Okay. No, you want to have 4
Anything,
units.
make it nice looking.
You want to have 4 units. Where will the doors be to enter each unit?
When you walk in the main entrance, you can assume the main entrance, the front door. Currently, it goes into the main lower level. Right now there's 3 separate entrances to the house. There's a private entrance that goes up to the second residence. That'll most likely stay. I'm not 100% sure what's going to be approved by the fire marshal yet. We're still in the beginning stages of that. That'll most likely stay as it exists right now. The main floor, front area, will be in the front door. You're going to walk in the front door, take the stairs up to the second floor, which will be the second apartment, and then there'll be another door, which is on the south side of the house, which will be entering the 4th unit. So each unit will have its own separate area to get in. The bottom unit, which is the main one right now, in the second floor, will share an entrance, be separated by a staircase, and it'll have a very nice foyer out front.
Okay, and I'm assuming you'll be, and it's probably not the purview of the zoning board, but working with the fire department, so there's...
Yes, ma'am. We have, our architectural firm has already been in contact with the State Fire Marshal's office, the city fire department. I don't know what the outcome of that is yet, because I've been focused on this aspect.
And one further question, if you could clear this matter up. It lists in Mr. Siciliano's documentation, you state the property is 14,323 square feet. However, the assessor's office has it at 12,480, and that's listed on the, on a document that we have in here. Can you explain that discrepancy?
No, I cannot.
I just want to jump in, if you don't mind,
No.
is that we do have an engineered plan here dated January 15th, 2018. This is here in our
Yeah.
package. And in the top right, this is by a civil engineering firm, TFM. And just to try to answer the question, in the top right, it has the existing lot size at 14,323. I'm just taking the liberty to say that, as we're actually in the first case, sometimes surveys aren't done till currently, and when I see a current engineered survey that has it,
Okay, I
I'm
stand
taking it,
corrected.
probably wasn't done before, and that's what it was, but I
Okay.
take the 14,323 to be correct, because that's the, the engineered plan before us. That's just me. But
No, I stand corrected. That would be Mr. Burns, because that's the TF Moran, I'm assuming. Mhm. Thank you.
Were there any other questions for Mr. Stewart or Mr. Burns? I think we're all set. You could have a seat. And now, again, as I mentioned in the rules, one and only one person from the opposition is allowed to speak. I see Mr. Siciliano on deck, so unless anybody has an objection to him, the fingers are pointing to you. That's a good thing in this case, so take it away, Mr. Siciliano.
Michael Siciliano, 95 Taylor Street. Clearly, this case is all about density, okay? Whether the lot is 12,480 square feet or whether it's 14,323 square feet, it's deficient. It doesn't meet the required square footage of 7,260 square feet per unit. It barely makes it as a two-family. It won't make it as a three, and it won't make it as a four per the building code, per the zoning code. It's clearly all about density, okay? The building permits that you see in the file, they all indicate 12,840 square feet, going back 20 years. Repeatedly, document after document, 12,480 square feet. So I asked the zoning board, before you make a decision, somebody needs to clarify whether it's 14,323, 12,480. Either way, it doesn't meet the required amount of land needed for a four-family. Doesn't mean it for a three. The applicant indicates that the exterior of the building won't be altered. Well, you're going to put a parking lot in the front lawn, okay, which means you're going to cut down trees, remove green space. I would assume if it is a four-family or maybe a three-family, you're going to have fire escapes on the exterior of that structure on both sides. That's an impact to the exterior of the building, which certainly affects the character of the neighborhood. You don't see that on a lot of other properties in the greater 865 square linear foot radius that I established. You just don't see it. You've got two families, most of those, they predate zoning. You've got a couple of three families, who knows how they arrived. Some of those were professional offices back in the 60s and 70s, which I think are converted into three families. Like I said, I've lived down there for over 50 years. I just don't see this piece of property meeting the requirement set forth by the city of Nashua. If the applicant wants to own a four-family, you can go out and buy a piece of land in Nashua that's zoned accordingly for that. He doesn't have to plunk it right down in the middle of our neighborhood. I just don't, I find that the applicant's, his representation to the city is a little bit misleading. We have a prior ZBA decision. That's in the application. I didn't see one. I don't know if the one even exists. If one doesn't exist, I consider that to be misleading on the application. The square footage. I don't think the tax assessor's office is incorrect when they've been sending a tax bill to that property for decades. 12,480 square feet. So again, I asked the zoning board, before you can make a decision, we need to clarify the square footage. Base your decision on that, but either way, it doesn't meet the required amount of land as set forth. 7,260 square feet is required per unit, which is almost 30,000 square feet, which is more than twice the size of the existing lot, whether it's 12 or whether it's 14. He needs 29,040 square feet to make this happen, based under the city of Nashua's requirements. It's way, way over the line. I just don't see it happening. If it does happen, where does it stop from here? You've got a lot of beautiful homes in South Nashua. Between that location and Revere College, are we going to see 3 and 4 families up and down Main Street as investment properties? I wouldn't want to see that, because I plan on living at 95 Taylor Street pretty much for the rest of my life, and I really enjoy South Nashua. And I don't want to see, along with other people in that neighborhood, a 4-family at that location, only because of the density. That's really the true facts here. It's all about the density of the lot. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Siciliano? Mr. Lionel, take it away.
Not really a question, but the whole reason that they're here, in part, is to get a variance from the density requirements. This is something we do almost every time. So that's a decision for us to make.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That the assessor's card might be wrong, it happens everywhere, I don't know, but that's interesting, but I don't think that that particular discrepancy by itself is as important as other issues that have been brought forward. Just my observation, that's all.
Okay. Any other questions?
I think we're all set.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks.
Thank you, members.
Mr. Boucher?
Before we move on, I just following what Mr. Lionel was talking about, whether or not it's important or not, or where we're at, I guess I'll try to get the feel before we move to the next phase. Are you confident that this is advertised correctly? And if it wasn't advertised, if there's a difference in square footage, I'm not saying that there is, would this be something that we should be concerned about or not at this point?
Well, since you're asking me, I'll give you my opinion. I kind of mentioned it before. When there's an engineered plan with a survey on it, with a stamp, I put great faith in that. And I just think about my property. I lived there a long time, and then I had a survey, and the property lines weren't exactly where my neighbor and I thought they were. Everything was a little different. And I said, how could that happen, you know? And the surveyor was like, hey, back in the day, it was just eyeball engineering. And so I take the 14343 to be correct, because that's an engineered plan. I don't want to say I'm not surprised, but I think the city office, I mean, somewhere along the line, they had that 12,000, and it just gets carried down because somebody looks at the card and writes it on the next, and the next, and the next. So I feel it's 14343 because of the plan. And where I'm at in my head, it doesn't make that much of a difference. It's not like I feel that needs to be clarified, but that's just me. And I think maybe we should go around the table and everybody could speak to the same question, but go ahead.
Maybe what would help is, maybe because I've seen some things in a different format, would it be just easier to suspend the rules and ask the engineer to come back and just verify how that number was read? Is it from an actual survey or just from some other calculation? And I think that would answer the question real quick.
Sure, I'd make a motion to suspend the rules and, well, actually, we didn't even,
Yeah,
I
we
didn't
didn't-
close a
That's
public
right. We
hearing.
didn't
We're
close
still
it,
in
so you don't
public
have to.
hearing, but I think it would still be a change of the rules to have the applicant come back and answer a specific question. So I make a motion that we ask the specific question to the applicant. Would you second that? Show of hands in favor. And again, the voting folks here is Mr. Welch in this case, so it'll be Lionel, Welch, Boucher, McKay, and myself, and that's unanimous. So, Mr. Burns, if you could indulge us, you've been following the conversation on the 1434 square feet, or in the building records, it is, as Ms. McKay opens it up to the page, what was that, 12480?
According to the city of Nashua.
So the boundary of the property, the boundary survey has not been updated to this point by our office on it, so it's based on research, going back, and our survey department just goes back through and they do the research on it. Pending the outcome tonight, our survey department then has to go out, we do a boundary survey and then topographic detail survey to accommodate the parking, look at site grading, things like that, so they would have to confirm it at that point. But to my knowledge, the way that the number is arrived at right now is through, it's through research done in the office and going back and looking at, they pull plans of the surrounding area, other plans of record that may be at the registry, but I don't have that information with me.
All right, question?
Yes. In July of 2005, the city of Nashua said it was 12,480 square feet. You state that you've done research and gone back. Did you go back that far, and did you research what the city had on record?
I'd have to find out from our survey department where what we typically do is they go through and they get the property information both from the city, but then they go to the registry, they pull plans for the surrounding neighborhood so that they can determine where lot lines are to establish lot areas to confirm. I don't know I didn't bring the research packet with me though.
So in follow-up, if I may, then this is an unconfirmed statement.
Right now, yeah, that's an unconfirmed till the surveyor, puts an error of closure statement on that and puts a stamp on it. Yeah, that would be considered, it's not finalized.
Thank you, Mr. Boucher.
Did you have another question?
No, I'm all set. I'm all set.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. And on those thoughts, with the acknowledgement that this is the 14343 may not be firm, it would be my belief that if this were approved, and when a survey is done, if that were 1 square foot less, they'd be back here all over again for an additional encroachment. Does anybody think it would be the other way, or would it be like that?
No, and can I ask also, where if we're looking at things that cause us consternation, if there was another zoning request, when does it exist? When was the house designated as a two-family? Because we don't seem to have any concrete documentation. And it appears that from what Mr. Siciliano gave us, there's permits and there's work orders where the family expanded over the garage, then they expanded over here. So they took a single-family home and kept adding and expanding and changing the footprint of the home to increase to these bedrooms. And does that change how we look at it? Because it wasn't the original structure that was built that way. I think of my own home, which was built in 1890, and it has 6 bedrooms. It had 6 bedrooms in 1890, and it has 6 bedrooms in 2018. The footprint of the home did not change. And so those are some of my other questions. If somebody's just adding on, then the property didn't change. The owner changed the property. And that is very different than what was in existence for 100 years. In my head, I could be wrong. This is my humble opinion.
You asking me, or?
Sure. I'll throw you right under the bus, Jack.
Well, I think that you're interpretation of this, that it's been expanding along the way, it is a fair interpretation. I mean, we have testimony tonight that says it's been a two-family with 2 meters for the whole 35 years of the, the applicant's life.
98 was when
And
the
that's
second
it.
meter was added,
Oh, okay,
In 1998, we have the document.
so that's 20 years ago.
okay. And we have, I don't think, any record of it officially becoming a two-family, other than it is recognized as a two-family, and a two-family is permitted in this zone
As a special exception.
as a special exception.
So somebody would have had to
Self-permitted.
file something.
Yeah, but I mean, I can't answer for what some staff members did 20-plus years ago. I mean, I wasn't there, so I don't know.
But in theory.
Possible.
So I think we have more questions than we have answers.
Well, I thought maybe we'd go around the table and see where we're all at. And maybe we'll go counterclockwise, and I'll start off this time. I mean, I find the applicant's long history of the house very compelling, but that is not a criteria that that's not a criteria to be weighed in on whether, a variance for, is warranted. And just in summary, I've heard the argument that Mr. Boucher makes, that there's 10 bedrooms and there's gonna be, X number of cars with or without. I see it differently. I think when there's more units in a home, there's much more activity with it. And in summary, I feel the density is too great, and I'm not favorable to the application because of that great incursion of the density as I see it. I'm open to hear the other opinions, but in terms of the 14,000 or 12,000 square feet, at this point, it doesn't make a difference to me, because I'm not favorable at the 14,323, but I'm very anxious to hear the other opinions.
Take it away. I concur. I'm not inclined to support this application simply because it's out of character with the neighborhood. Maybe if they were gonna keep it to a two-family, that's one thing. But going to a four-family, it seems like they're asking for us to give them a huge overbuilt building on this small footprint of property. And in my head, you're correct, the density is it's huge. It's very hard for me to overcome that. And the home is gorgeous. And I understand the applicant wanting to keep it in character, wanting to keep it aesthetically pleasing. The parking is a non-issue for me, because if they have 10 bedrooms and they rent out rooms, they would have 10 people driving in and out. So that's just a non-starter for me. But the density issue and the out of character within the neighborhood, that's where I have the problem, and that's where I don't think I can support. Plus, there's too many questions, and I just don't have the answers.
Ms. Boris?
I concur with both of you. I'm not in favor due to the density, out of character, turning it into a 4-unit from a 2-unit. I'm just not in favor for that area and that beautiful home.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher?
Still, thoughts are, I was just running in my head whether or not, if the square footage was wrong, it said they'd be back. I just always in a position that, our job, we're here to volunteer, but I think we're also here to, we're here to serve the constituents of Nashua, and I just want to make sure that we're always in a position to help, right? Applicants, that we're not holding something back. That's always a concern. So that's why I ask these questions, because I certainly wouldn't want us to spend a lot of time and work just for something like this to, catch it coming back, right? But again, that may or may not make a difference as we go along. So, again, I know, a lot of discussion around the parking and the character of the neighborhood and the house, and I do live near Bishop Girton, so I do travel that area a lot, and I do like the house. I see it, and, I've seen, and I knew before I even came here that it had to be a two-family, only because I kind of pay attention to the vehicles in the driveway and, what's going on. With that said, I'm struggling to support the four-unit building. Now, I will say to you that at a lesser impact, if the proposal was for a 3, and we were not expanding and putting a driveway in the front lawn, I'd even be saying, hey, you gotta get rid of that driveway in the front, get rid of it completely, because I think that's just a problem there. But that withstanding, I don't think I could support the 4. I could support the 3, because I think if it were to be a 3, and I'm not proposing that it be, I'm just saying that I think that the current structure and the way it is, and the parking that's down below off East Dunstable, I think could support a 3-family I think without it being this huge kind of impact. But I think, again, that a 4-unit, I'm struggling with that, to see how that would fit in. But I would consider a lesser impact. In my mind, I could come to a better place and justify that for myself, for my opinion, on a lesser impact. So the reasons that again, why I don't think I could support it is the case of the 4-family. I mean, Mr. Curry does make a point, and I don't disagree. I agree with him that again, if it was all the bedrooms were occupied, you definitely have 8 vehicles there. But we also know that people come and go, and there's additional traffic, and so that's why I'm again in the position that this is not on a less traveled side street where there's plenty on-street parking or stuff like that. This is at a major intersection, one of the major intersections in Nashua. It's heavily traveled, and so I'm having a hard time supporting that. I am completely confident that the applicant will be still invested in. I think that it would be a big. It sounds like it would be a big step for him to purchase the property, but I think he would be completely invested, and I know that he would not would be changing the character of that home. Again, discussion around when it becomes a 4-family, and again, I don't know. I just have to refresh myself. When it goes to 3-family. Does the fire department have review over it also? And so maybe there's other things that would happen that would have to happen to the exterior structure, but I don't know that. But right now, I can't support the 4-unit building, the application as it stands.
Thank you. Mr. Welch?
Yep. So I think there's a lot of issues that have come up that maybe fall into planning or the fire marshal's office. I mean, at the end of the day, the outside of the building, as we've heard, isn't going to change. All right, so it's not going to really affect the neighborhood, the values of the home, any of that. I'm leaning to not support it just because of the density and because of how the laws were written before. It's a pretty big ask, to basically cut it in half. So, I don't think the parking space is an unreasonable request. My issue is just the density. And I think there's a lot of the other issues are up to, even when we heard about, fire escape, stuff like that, that's planning, that's the fire marshal, has nothing to do with us.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lionel?
I pretty much concur with my colleagues. The parking issue is not much of a problem for me. That garage with the driveway, although technically, yes, you could support 4 or 5 or even 6 cars there, practically speaking, that doesn't work because nobody who's probably inside the garage would be able to get out, and you're backing onto one of the busiest intersections in the city. So that's not a problem, but I do definitely have a problem with the density. The exterior of the house is not going to be changing other than the parking pad, which is behind a fence, and you really wouldn't see that. The interior of the house is going to be significantly changed. And I just can't support this.
Thank you. Ms. Vitale?
I'm not in favor of the density. I do think there's a couple of questions that were brought up as to when the approval was made for the two properties. It'd be interesting to know that. And since there is 2 meters there, wouldn't have been the first time that meters were put in and the property became 2 property without maybe an approval back whenever. But that was before the applicant's knowledge of it. So it would still be something I would look at. I don't like the density. Even though the 3 parking spaces up in front technically wouldn't bother me because of the way the location is, just the fact that you're encouraging parking there and the, access, egress is where it is located, that's the part of it that bothers me for that parking. Other than the outside look of the house, just adding, if you had 4 apartments there, I do think it would change the values of the homes that are in that area. We didn't really have any testimony for or against that you could really rely on, but I think that it would, if I was living next to a home that, they think that it is 1 family. I'm not surprised that it's 2 family, but to change it to a 4 family home, I do think would change the values. That's, as a neighbor, that's what I would think of right off the bat. It's brought up some other possibilities, but they're not before us tonight, so I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of this just on density alone.
All right, thank you. Did anybody else want to have any other comments to make on the application? I mean, if not, I'm not finding any support, and maybe I'll just hazard a motion.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
If we do what it looks like we're going to do, and we deny, can the applicant bring another applicant or application forward for a 3-family, say? I don't want to handcuff the applicant, but maybe a step down might be a good compromise.
Maybe I'll just provide my opinion, and anybody can provide their opinion, or I'll just kick that off first. In my opinion, if this were denied as a 4-family, and the applicant came back, say, with a request as a 3-family, I think that the board would need to weigh the Fisher versus Dover as to whether that's a substantially different application than what was before.
I forgot about that.
In my opinion, that's the way that would play out. And since I'm speaking, my thought is, like on the idea, like Mr. Boucher talked about, of the 3-family, that's what you're alluding to. I'm not inclined to even consider that myself anyway for this application, because the number of units, that goes into how the internal structure of the house is designed and how much the variance and driveway is needed. And so I'm not big on compromises like that. In my mind, a smaller request, say a 3-family, to me, that's material different than a 4-family. I don't know if I'd be in favor of it or not, but, you know, just to throw it out there, if something like that came in the future, I believe probably that would be a materially different application. But that's just me, and anybody else can weigh their opinions on it, or,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the board has to deliberate and vote on what's before you right now. If they want to come in with a 3-family or some other configuration, we don't even know if they want to do that. We'd have to consider that when that comes in, because there's too many other things that we're not aware of, and there's too much speculation on that. There's enough speculation on what this is now for what they have, but I think if that comes in, we'll have to just go over it at that time. If they do submit something for a 3 with some different parking configuration, our staff would bring it forward to the board, and then it would be up to the board to determine whether or not it does meet the Fisher versus Dover determination, and go from there. So otherwise, there's too many other factors we don't know about.
Okay, makes sense.
well, is there any other discussion on Mr. Boucher?
So I just want to point out, I wasn't suggesting that the applicant do this, I was just from my opinion. And again, I'm not here to confuse or what we're voting on, because I know what we're voting on. I know for myself, I agree with Mr. Currier that if anything substantially different, and I was thinking in my mind, that would be, for me, substantially different enough. Because if it wasn't, what I would have brought forward was knowing that I wouldn't want to handcuff, as you said. If I was really concerned, maybe what I would suggest is maybe a tabling to let the applicant go back and something. But I felt confident that anything, it would have to be significantly different, and I think that a lesser application, I mean, number of units or whatever it is, you know, with parking and all that, would to me be different enough. But that's my opinion, and again, of course, the board could vote completely different on that, but that was my opinion. So that's why I didn't suggest that. So that was my thought. And again, just thinking kind of out of the box, but that's just who I am.
I guess I'd like to throw one other thing out. It's, you know, certainly this board has sometimes come to maybe what I would call a negotiated settlement. I think some of the issues I remember, I think, are a bit smaller, like a shed, say, is proposed to be like 2 feet from a property line where 6 feet is required, and like an abutter might have an issue with it, and kind of the board will say, how about 3 feet, and you know, and the applicant's okay with it, because something like that, I think, is a lot simpler. You can just see it, okay, we're gonna pull it back a foot, and it's less, so we all agree to it. But the number of units in a structure like this, I think, is a pretty big deal, as Mr. Falk was saying, and not so easy to just notch it down a little and everything turns out okay.
I just want to point out that again, that's what I was thinking of too, is just so that it's on the record. Mr. Curry is right. I think in this case, there's too many questions. So if this was really straightforward, clear cut, and we decided, hey, as a group, with, you know, people who would be maybe in favor would say, hey, 4 is too much density, but 3, we're real comfortable because of all this information we have. But we don't have that information, or nothing was presented to come there, because we could have approved this as a lesser incursion, right, as a 3. But again, I think we all believe that we just don't have what we need to even consider that. It wasn't even on the table, you know, on the table for us to consider. So again, we could do exactly what Mr. Curry is suggesting, as he says, for a shed. But I think this would have been a bigger type of thing. But there's no way that at this point that I would have even enough to even consider that. So with that, I won't belabor this anymore.
I concur. If hypothetically, if I was the applicant and I was going to come back with something else, I think that I would probably have all the questions that we have answered, so that it wouldn't be such a stumbling block. Because to get the answers then supports the request There's just too many variables, and each one of us is sitting here saying that it's not something that I think we want to say no. You always want to listen to everybody and try and say yes, but this one, there's way too many questions. And my philosophy is always, when in doubt, don't.
I guess, is there any other discussion? Mr. Welch?
Question. So there's 3 requests here, so, whatever ends up happening next, we had a lot of conversation about the driveway. If we make a ruling on the drive, or the parking spots now, is that gonna affect stuff down the road potentially?
Well, it's an interesting point. I guess, I think that for our testimony, we'll have a big hang-up with the square footage, which is use variance, not, the first variance. The second variance, well, actually, the first one is a use variance of a 2 to a 4, and I think that is what we're not finding consensus on. Number 2 is strictly the square footage of the land, and I think we're all finding heartache with that. Number 3 is the variance for the driveway. But I don't know, I'm finding number 3 is needed for number 1 and 2.
I think you just should consider the whole application as a whole.
Yeah.
And not
Yeah.
pick out 1 or 2, that they're all related to one another. I think they're all for one.
So.
I think take them all together is the best option.
I agree. We have questions. If we have questions on the square footage, that's going to have an impact on where 14 feet into the 25-foot required, front yard setback actually exists.
Let me hazard a motion. I'm going to make a motion. Again, the applicant is John Stewart, and the owner is a Charlotte Thibault Revocable Trust. I'm making a motion to deny the 3 variances before us tonight. The first one is the use variance to convert a 2-family to a 4-family. The second one is minimum land area. The proposal would require 29,040 square feet, and what's present on our record tonight is 14,323 square feet. Certainly there is some question about that, but 14,323 is the more generous requirement. And even with that, I'm making a motion to deny. And the third variance is to encroach up to 14 feet into the 25-foot required front yard setback. All 3 of these variances are needed for the proposal to have convert the house to a 4-family unit. I'm making a motion to deny, because I believe that the variance is not needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property. I think the board has noted that there's 10 bedrooms, a couple of which are very large, but I think in totality, the board is finding that the number of units in the neighborhood is not 4, is very out of character with the neighborhood by the testimony we have tonight. I think the board is finding, at least in majority, that it's not within the spirit and intent of the ordinance to allow 4 units in this structure or in this zone. I think the board finds that it will adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels. I think the board finds it's not contrary to public interest, and it's not needed to provide substantial justice to the owner. So I make a motion to deny the 3 variances, and Mr. Lionel's hand is in the air for a second to the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? And again, the 3 voting members are Mr. Lionel, Welch, Boucher, McKay, and myself. So a show of hands in favor of the motion to deny is unanimous. So with that, the application is denied. And again, there's a 30-day window of appeal. Everybody, please pay attention to that, because anybody has a right to request a rehearing within 30 days. And with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 2. Are we good to go, or do we want to take a 5-minute recess?
So, let's read the vote maybe real quick, because it looks like we're clearing out.
You want to take a recess?
No, but
Oh,
There's one more.
yeah, we have one more case.
I think we're good. I think we're
Okay, I'd like to open up the public meeting on case number 3. The owner is Robert and Fatima Vasquez. The address is 138 Kinsley Street. The request is a special exception for a major home occupation for an in-home daycare up to 5 children. Hi, good evening. If you'd like to give us your name and address and walk us through your application.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Fatima Vasquez, and we live in 138 Kingsley Street, Nassau, New Hampshire.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Roberto Vasquez. We live in 138 Kinsley Street, Nashua, New Hampshire.
All right, thank you. So we have a written application from you. Would you like to briefly walk us through your request? Or I could just start with some questions.
Yeah, you could start with some questions because
Let's go that way.
it's our first time, so we didn't even get a copy of that, so we again did something
Okay.
different.
So you're seeking to have a daycare unit. One of the big questions, first of all, is a fence. It looks to me like you've got a 6-foot fence around your backyard. I can't see it. You had some pictures here. So have you, well, let me ask Mr. Falk, if you,
We went over all the, there's different requirements for a childcare facility. I went over them with Roberto, and I believe they meet all the criteria. You know, it's a single family. They're going to have 5 children. The max is 12. The land area is fine. They have they have adequate parking for the use, and they do have the fence. So we believe they meet all the criteria.
okay, so just to summarize that, there's 6 criteria, and Mr. Falk briefly touched on those, and in our application, it walks us through that those 6 are met. So a couple questions I have is, I was curious about the driveway. Is it on the left or the right side of your house? It was a little unclear to me.
To the right side.
It's on the right side?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the play area is strictly gonna be in the back, is proposed to be in the backyard?
Yeah, the backyard.
And do you have any comments? I mean, certainly, I think Kinsley is kind of a busy street in terms of pickup or drop-off. Would your intent be folks just pull over to the curb or in your driveway? I'm not sure if.
We're gonna have
what the
one
parking
spot
situ-
on the driveway.
Uh-huh.
And 2 there's parking on the street, so you just drop off and pick up at the time. But
Okay.
they're gonna be able to use the driveway.
Okay.
I thought they mentioned that they would have staggered times, so not everybody comes at the exact same
Yeah.
time. They come at different times, pick up and drop off, so it's not like all the cars come there. And with 5, that's not as significant as some of the other ones we've seen with like 10 or 12.
All right, I'm all set with my questions. I didn't know if anybody else, Mr. Lionel, has a question for you?
Not really a question, just the written application says 6 children, and the form that we got here says 5. Not that I think it makes a difference because, but.
At the very end, they wrote under 6.
Under 6, oh, that's the age, okay.
Kind of crossed out, but yeah.
Oh, I see. Under 6 children, okay. All right, that's, it was just, it says 6 here and 5 there, so.
Yeah, it's confusing.
But it's 5?
Yep.
5, okay.
5. Yeah. I've looked at the property, it's opposite, it's just past the hospital, it's opposite the graveyard there, so there's no houses on the other side of the street. It's not as, anywhere near as busy an area as it is further down towards Main Street. So I don't have a problem with this.
All right, any other questions for the applicant? I think we're all set, and there's no one here to provide any negative testimony, and we don't have anything on record. So you could have a seat, and I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts on the matter, Ms. Vitale? Feel free to have a seat if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
I know you
Yeah,
did.
just to clarify, it'll be, Ms. Boras will be voting on this case, seeking thoughts from everyone, though.
No, I think parking should be fine as far as dropping off and picking up. The backyard is fenced, as we've heard. It's not that large of a group of children, and there'll be staggered times coming and going, so I would be in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Lionel?
I'm in favor.
Mr. Welch?
I have no issues.
I'm in favor, and Mr. Lionel said exactly what my thoughts were. It's at the top end of what I call the top end of Kingsley Street after the hospital. No houses across the street, plenty of on-street parking, wide enough at that section, so it's not congested, so I'm in full support of the application as it stands.
Thank you. Ms. Boras?
I'm in full support as well. I agree with all my colleagues.
Ms. McKay?
I guess I could say ditto.
I'll say ditto also. Mr. Lionel, would you like to make a motion?
Sure. Give me a second here. Okay. Papers in order. All right. I'd like to make a motion to approve the special exception request. Owner is Roberto and Fatima Vasquez, address 138 Kinsley Street, requesting a special exception from Land Use Code 19036 for a major home occupation for an in-home daycare for up to 5 children. This is listed in the table of uses. We have discussed the traffic issues and decided that there will be no undue traffic congestion nor impair pedestrian safety. We don't think there will be any overload of public water, drainage, or sewer, or other municipal systems. All the special regulations are fulfilled and will not impair the integrity or be out of character with the neighborhood or detrimental to the health, morals, welfare of residents.
Could I indulge you just to briefly speak about the next page there? And
Next page. There is a second page, yes. Okay, so there are yes, there are special conditions. The child daycare facility shall be subordinate to a single-family detached dwelling, which is the case. The maximum capacity of a child daycare facility shall be 12 children. The applicant wants fewer than that. A child daycare facility providing care for 6 or more children, that does not apply because the applicant says 5 or fewer. There is on-site parking for the principal residential use. There is. Outdoor activities shall not be located in the front yard. They are in the backyard as per testimony, and shall be enclosed by a solid fence. There is an existing fence there already, so that should not be an issue. Not less than 6 feet in height, which shall be erected and maintained in good condition around the outdoor activity area. No signs shall be permitted except for a nameplate not exceeding 1 square foot in size and attached flat to the main structure.
all right, I'll second that motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? So a show of hands in favor of the motion. So that's unanimous. So congratulations, it's approved. Sorry you waited through all those 2 long cases. You never know how long they're going to be. There is that 30-day window of appeal. I mean, it's unlikely that there was no one here to speak in opposition, but you never know. So good luck with your daycare. All right, we'll close the public meeting on case number 3. We have an agenda. Take a look to see if we see any regional impact. April Drive.
That's down off of East Glenwood and.
Oh, okay.
that General area, back of McClogan. Remember that one? That he came in for a two-family, and it was, it was not supported, now he's coming in for the, special exception for the in-law.
I think for regional impact, we had voting Kathy and then Jay and then Ms. Boraz. I think we'll go back to Ms. Vitale for regional impact. Do you see any regional impact?
I do not.
Mr. Lionel?
No.
No.
Ms. McKay? And I don't, so that's 5, that there's no regional impact with Ms. Vitale voting for it. Is there any business to be brought before the board tonight?
Officers, we wait till Mr. Shaw,
I would think it'd be prudent,
full board.
you know, that the full board is here, and the next time that happens, hopefully it's not a long meeting, and we could have a vote after that. So with that, I'll make a
Or we
motion.
could elect Mr. Shaw to all 3 positions.
We could do that. I don't know if we should do
Hey,
that.
Rob, guess what?
Surprise.
Make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second to the motion? All in favor? Guess Mr. Welch will be the deciding vote on that. So with that, we're adjourned.